Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. Tonight we have the privilege of chatting with Dr. Roger Hadley, a urologist who is a treasure trove of fascinating stories and far-reaching friendships. If you like what you hear tonight, please subscribe. Roger, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the podcast. This is a special one for me because I've known you for a while. I'm really excited to chat about stories and listen to your thoughts about the world because I know you have a lot to give. So we're going to get into some interesting things, I hope, today. But the first question I want to ask you, which I think is probably one of the most important questions, is you're a golfer.
I pretend to be one.
You hit a little white ball at least quite frequently.
Too frequently.
But I'd like to hear from you on those Sunday mornings, early in the mornings. What are some of the life lessons you've learned on the golf course?
Oh, my. Patience. That perfection is impossible. But for some reason, I can't get over the fact that I can't be better. I've learned that exercise is good, and I find that walking when I play golf to be much more meaningful than what most people do, and that is drive a cart. For some reason, I feel like, God gave us the ability to walk. Let's walk.
And interestingly, walking with a purpose, right? If you just go walk around the block, it's different than going and walking 18 holes.
I have only one purpose, and that is to stay ahead of you.
Well, these days that's not so hard. But, one of the things that came out of that in some of our conversations on those Sunday morning walks, I don't remember how many years this has been going on for, but that you weigh yourself every day.
Really?
Yes, I think staying in good health is an individual thing, and everybody has what works for them. In fact, most doctors, when patients give advice for losing weight, which is something that we need to do more in this country, most doctors will say, what have you done in the past that works? Because do it again. And I think that's, for me, it's walking. To expend energy and to burn calories is my way of trying to stay healthy and stay near ideal body weight.
I've heard that you play those golf rounds very quickly. Is that true? Are you sprinting?
It's just a personality defect of mine that I just have to keep moving. I don't want people in front of me, and I want to go. I want to go home and got things to do.
Roger's one of the few individuals when you ask, how did you play golf today? Most times you'll hear a response, well, I shot a 76 or an 85. He'll say, I played in 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Yeah. And
that's my kind of game.
And made 112 shots.
I love that. I love that you're going through things quickly. And I love that it's teaching you patience in some ways, though.
It does that, yes.
Humility.
Yep, a lot of that.
Integrity.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Do I really have to count that third bunker shot?
Yeah. And what do you mean you're not going to give me a 3-footer?
Tell me, how long have you known Dr. Hilliard?
Oh, my. I've known his parents for a long time. And I remember when Dr. Hilliard was born. In fact, he's sort of the first child of a group of friends. And we were having an evening get-together. And sure enough, we've got a baby in our house, and it was put in a high chair. His mother brought 4 bed sheets, put it around him and around the entire kitchen because food was going to fly when Anthony was going to eat. And sure enough, it did. But the kitchen was spotless afterwards when the sheets were taken away.
It's interesting to know that about yourself as an infant because some may argue that hasn't really changed that much around the table.
I love that you guys have that history and that you have this relationship now of golfing and obviously professionally getting to know each other. Tell us a little bit about just your journey here at Loma Linda. It's so long and lengthy, and it's obviously rooted in a lot of history with your family. But I will never forget you telling me that you didn't want to come to Loma Linda as a child.
Loma Linda, which is now celebrating approximately 120 years. It's an amazing story. In the early 19th century, he says, we're going to build a medical school. And it's going to be at Loma Linda. If you want to know what Loma Linda looked like in the 1910s and 1920s, it was farmland. Oh, sure, you can build some buildings and teach biochemistry, anatomy, histology, etc. But you got to eventually take care of patients. And when there's no people, there's no patients. So for a number of years, half the school's history, after completing the first 2 years of medical school, the students checked out of their apartments, moved down to Los Angeles where the patients were. And in Los Angeles was 2 hospitals, the White Memorial Hospital and LA County. And in that era, it was the county hospitals nationwide, whether it was Cook County, whether it was Charity, the one in New York, Bellevue, were the greatest teaching hospitals prior to the Medicare era. And the LA County Hospital is one of those. And our medical students shared the county hospital with USC. By the way, USC went bankrupt for 3 or 4 years back in the early part of the 20th century. And we had to graduate, Loma Linda had to graduate their students. Decades later, I was talking to a dean who was just retiring from USC, the dean. And he says, by the way, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I said, well, and I kind of knew where he's going to go. He says, yeah, back in the 1920s, you saved us.
Unbelievable. I had never heard that story.
Well, now you've heard this story. And he put it in his book that he sent me the book that tells the story of that. And but Loma Linda had a very successful clinical teaching program in Los Angeles. And it would be in the mid-1960s that they decided to move the camp. They didn't.
I was going to say they
didn't decide.
There's a lot of discussions about that, right?
Accrediting bodies came in and says,
Yeah.
you're not going to be at an accredited medical school unless you have the basic science teaching the same campus as the clinical education. So we had to decide: do we move the basic science into Los Angeles, or do we move the clinical sciences out to Loma Linda? They decided the latter. They built the Loma University Medical Center, as we know, opening in 1968, the towers, now called the Henshaw Towers. And it's been a very successful teaching program since then.
But it was controversial.
Yeah.
Oh,
you didn't want to move.
Well, I didn't not only want to move, but my dad and grandfather, both of whom were on faculty, voted against moving. And when Dr. Henshaw got a negative vote, you know what he did? He adjourned the meeting and moved.
So when we say they decided, it was...
Dr. Henshaw said, okay, that's your decision, but we're moving.
We're moving. And, you know, there's some symmetry to this is the place when Ellen White saw in her vision. And look at us now.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a mission here in our backyard and in our front yard. So you have something I'm very fascinated by. A library of pictures about the history of this place and about every place. And it's become a pictorial journal. I think it's become more than just taking pictures. You were doing selfies before there was a hashtag selfie thing.
It's true.
I remember this with medical students before there was an iPhone or anything like that. But I wanted to hear from you a little bit about how that started and kind of the life that it's taken for you and sort of the meaning that it has to really, I mean, truly have a library of pictures about the history of your life here and everywhere else.
Well, it started with my father. My father never left the house without a camera. This is well before electronic pictures. And he got smaller and smaller cameras, and he started a filing, and I've got all of his pictures. They're nowhere near as what we have now because everybody's taking pictures all the time. But I have that file. I've been able to digitize most of them. I watched him, and I figure, my goodness, I better continue that legacy. So I have. An example is that both Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan have visited Loma Linda. They came in on the Marine One helicopter, which is what transports them from Air Force One to wherever they're going. There were no cell phone cameras out. The press wasn't even out. I've got the only color moving pictures of these people landing at Loma Linda.
Wow.
And speaking at Loma Linda, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. It had to do with the VA and the decision to build the VA, which is a very important topic in medical education. Loma Linda's history is how the VA became part of Loma Linda and what it means to our teaching programs. It's an invaluable and underestimated and not talked enough gift to the educational program of medical physicians at Loma Linda.
And the natural collaboration, because that was our land, right?
We gave them the land as part of the deal. It was a brilliant move.
Wow. How incredible that you have, number one, such a deep history, but you also have proof of that history. And I think that's incredible. You must have huge hard drives somewhere saved with all your photos.
Yes. Hard drives can have a lot of capacity. And I've made a commitment. That's difficult for me to kind of say it because now people are going to hold me to it. But I need to, with the librarian and the archivist, I need to have a system where this is easily searchable. The pictures and the story behind the pictures. Yeah. And I hope to spend my retirement years in making sure that that's as completed as possible, as much as possible.
I think it's really beautiful because I've heard you relate memories and stories to photos you have. So you don't just have a huge hard drive, you also have a huge memory.
No, that's just it. Pictures are one of the most important ways to remember something.
I agree.
And so when you see the pictures, suddenly that memory comes up. So actually, I have a compromised memory. I use pictures as a crutch.
You're a digital archaeologist in your brain.
Yeah, okay.
The first time I ever met you was in a meeting, and it was a rather serious meeting. And like many at Loma Linda do, the meeting spilled out to the outside. The meeting had concluded, and we were still chatting, and we were chatting with my boss, and we had a great conversation. And you said, "Oh, wait, we got to take a photo." And we took a selfie right there in the middle of Coleman Pavilion. And I remember thinking, oh, that was unique. And then I came to find out you do that with everyone. You do that with everyone. Are you going to take a selfie right now in the air?
I could, but yes, I will. But what I want to point out is that I carried a camera on my hip for the longest time, digital camera, because a camera on my hip, I got the widest angle lens. And the wider the lens, the more people can get in a selfie. And so now it's kind of a contest. And I gave up my hip cameras because iPhone now has a wide angle lens on this side. So what you can do with a wide angle lens is you don't do the classic selfie. You put it on the wide angle lens, you hold it up like this, take the picture, and you get considerably more in the picture than you would with the standard selfie.
For those of you listening to this episode, he just took a beautiful selfie and actually fantastically done. And that's expert level selfie. I couldn't do that.
Well, I didn't know he was doing that. I would have looked much more presentable. Candidly, I'm a little disappointed, Roger.
You have a skeptical look on it.
You've proven your skills.
But I think that, and I remember Dr. Hadley, Roger's dad, at Drayson Center for the Warren Miller films. And, just, the idea of community.
Yeah.
I think the pictures, the engagement, one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is the recognition of the importance of community. Recognizing that, we are all part of a bigger thing than ourselves, and how you identify leadership, how you engage people to move the needle along is really an art. That's why you were the longest serving dean at Loma Linda, which we haven't even talked about, is, your impact on the organization. And I want to, you don't know I'm going to ask you this question because I don't tell you what I'm going to ask you, but I actually think it's a wonderful leadership scenario. I remember you were talking about age, and you said, Anthony, because you gave me my first leadership role on campus, you and Dr. Peverini, and I'm grateful for that. And I was like, I'm a little young, and you were telling me about the 1206G Corporation vote.
Oh my!
I told you I'm not going to. They're not all. Okay. But I think it's worth hearing this because I think it shows the value of building trust and relationships. So first, tell us about this corporation we have on campus. It's a very unique corporation that allows us to conduct business with the hospitals.
The Loma Linda's success through its faculty practice plan has been the common mission of a group of physicians that believe in the whole person care program. However, it doesn't survive unless we do the business of medicine correctly. And that requires a business approach, requires a mission-based business approach. And it was very clear that we needed to, one, consolidate the practices. So because we had to have common medical records, when I first came out here, every department had their own medical record. You consolidate the practice, but more importantly, it was clearly evident that the practice of medicine was moving towards an integration between the hospital and the doctors. Prior to that, they were just independent organizations, reimbursed differently, et cetera. Well, there's laws, and the laws are correct. They're there for a purpose. That is, hospitals can't pay doctors because that's a conflict of interest, because they'll pay the doctor to do all the surgeries they can, and pretty soon you're now changing your indications. So the hospital is at conflict and cannot send money to the doctors. They made an exception for medical education, and they developed the 1206G corporations. So University Healthcare, which was still here, was born. And the first meeting was Dr. Hinshaw had identified the first members of the board. And there was about 8 or 9 of us as chair of departments. And they said, okay, the first order of business is you got to pick a leader. Wow. And I was the kind of the young guy in the room. And
how old were you?
44. And I can remember that.
I'm impressed. You pulled that quick.
And they started to do secret ballots. And they put names up. And my name never got the most votes. But as they started eliminating names, it ended up, I was sort of the second choice of enough people that I ended up being the choice. And a meeting that I came to that I really didn't know what it was, I walked away being in charge of it. And I'm going, this is a wake-up call. And so immediately from that day on, leadership, corporate organizational structure, the understanding of the business of medicine became a priority.
One thing you told me about that is, it's a nice example of the value of not burning bridges. Whether you agree or not is one thing, but to have the level of integrity and respect that you can both agree that your approach may be slightly different, but you're going towards the same goal is important, because what that illustrated to me was those individuals in the room had enough quote unquote beef with one another over time that they're like, well, I can't have this person be the leader. But Roger hasn't had the political fallout, if you will, or has earned the trust of his colleagues. Or someone could say hadn't had enough time yet to build those, but I don't think that's true. No. I think your legacy on campus would be one of building, like I said, collaborative relationships, engaging the sense of community, which is why you were such an effective leader. Yeah. But I thought that was a very fascinating sort of initial rise to what's a very, very important corporation on campus.
And thank you for articulating that, because I don't think we say it often enough in leadership. You have to be perceived as mission first, not your personal goals. And when you're perceived that way by your colleagues, especially in an organization which is not a for-profit and has its other missions of an institution with a mission like ours, your decisions and your words, it's best for you to be reflected through clearly that's his mission or her mission.
And I feel like that goes right back to Loma Linda and really what you did at the School of Medicine. Is that mission first mentality?
Well, I think it's what it should be for any institution, especially not-for-profits. But yes, you've got to wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what's our goals here? And does that decision, does it get us closer to our goals? And I think if you're able to portray that, you'll get the confidence of people, which is very important.
You've done a lot of wonderful things on campus. I think you've been an advocate for students who haven't had voices. So what is the hooding ceremony at the School of Medicine? What is its significance?
This is a ceremony that occurs during graduation. And you're referring to the hoodie, not the white coat ceremony.
Correct.
Is that correct? Mm-hmm. there's 3 services at the graduation, which are traditional. I think they go back hundreds of years. There's consecration, baccalaureate, and then commencement. The hooding ceremony occurs during the consecration, which is committing yourself to something bigger than all of us. And on Friday night, the medical students who are graduating that weekend, we hood them, and we invite them to select people who will actually put the hood on them. The hood is part of the regalia of graduation. And that symbols trust. It symbols a commitment to the wellness of your patients. And at Loma Linda, it's part of reaching the patient through not only their physical, mental, and emotional issues, but we all have a spirituality. Every human being has a part of them as a spiritual part. And we want to address that, regardless of religion at Loma Linda. We want to address the patient's needs when they need it the most, bringing a loving God to the bedside that wants the best for all of us.
And so it's special when you are, I remember mine vividly, when you're a medical student and you choose the individual or individuals who are going to hood you. It's very symbolic. And for me, it was my dad and my grandfather, and that was a no-brainer, both class of 51 and 75 here from the School of Medicine. I know that there was a very special student, I believe a transgender student, who reached out to you to be the person who hooded them.
Yes, and this was like most things in life, the students become your best teacher, your patient becomes your best teacher. This is one where the student became my best teacher. He approached me, and in medical school, he was admitted as a she, and through medical school transitioned to transgender male. His parents didn't accept that. Customarily, the parents do the hooding. So he needed somebody to hood them and came to me and said, "Can you do this for me?" I thought to myself, oh my, that's trust. How valuable is that to me? And I treasure that moment. And it was a turning point for me because I knew this is what is kind. This is what God wants us to be, and that is to accept people who they are, to engage them, and to be kind.
To love your neighbor.
To love your neighbor.
What a revelation on seeing the whole person. I think we talk a lot about that at Loma Linda, but that truly, you saw the whole person there.
And I appreciate you saying that, because whole person care is what we've been talking about for over 50 years, and this is an example of that. Thank you.
You have hung up your coat.
That's correct. On July 31, just a little over a month ago, I saw my last patient. It was a year before that I made the decision that I'd see my last patient on July 31, 12 months later. And also, July 31 would be exactly 40 years from the day I started at Loma Linda and saw my first patient. So
cool.
It's made the year quite eventful for me, quite exciting, because I was going for a goal.
Talk to me about your last patient.
Oh, knowing that was going to be my last day, I said, I need to have a last patient. Well, 40 years before, Dr. Moorhead, a pediatric urologist, and I operated on a young girl, spina bifida, who needed bladder reconstruction. And so we used part of her bowel to reconstruct a new bladder. And I've been following her now. She's now 44 years of age, and I've been following her every year. And I said, I need to have her be my last patient. So she came in, took pictures.
She knew she knew she was your last patient?
Yeah. Oh, no, this was...
How perfect.
Yeah, it was.
For both of you.
Well, for me, certainly.
Yeah.
And to be able to say this is... my father died from a heart attack in an airport with 30 patients scheduled next day. I think back, he never had the chance to see his last patient. And I treasure that.
Yeah.
And I'll keep track of her, but it will not be as her doctor, but as a friend.
Something happened on hole 10 recently at the golf course where we usually play. What was that?
I had that one chance in about a zillion for me. I got a hole in one. And it just reminds you that it's dumb luck.
The question I have to ask is, were you looking around the green or was it kind of at the pin?
No, it was kind of bouncing up to the green. We couldn't quite see it. And as I approached and I didn't see my ball in the green, I go, oh, it went to the back trap. And I go, that's where it usually is.
Wow.
But I've done and always kind of without thinking anything's going to happen. So I better just check the hole to make sure it didn't actually drop in the hole. And I looked there. There was my golf ball. I said, you won't believe it. I got a hole in one.
You took a bunch of pictures, right?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, if there was one moment in time where a picture had to be taken,
We
it
need
was
a photo of that.
So was that before or after July 31?
I think it was just after.
So you can safely say you never had a hole in one in your practice because you were very focused on your career.
That's it.
But now that you retired, you're putting your effort into golf. Watch out, world.
Yeah. I'm not going to count on that.
Yeah.
You know, Roger, this has been a real special treat for us. I like to end each segment by asking our guest the following question. When you hear the term evening rounds, I'd like to hear from you, what does it mean to you?
When I first saw notices and some clips from your program, Evening Rounds, I go, ooh, because it wasn't that many years ago that a book was published by the School of Medicine. It was the second of a series of 3 of devotional books, and the second one was called Evening Rounds. The first book being called Morning Rounds, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of Loma Linda University School of Medicine. Now, I was dean, and you know, the 100th anniversary doesn't sneak up on you. You've known for 100 years. You've had 100 years to prepare
for it.
to celebrate it. And so a couple of years ahead of time, I asked my wife to quit her current job. She's a very talented person in organizations. And I said, I need to have you set up the celebration we are going to have when the school is 100 years old. So she had 2 years warning. The first thing she said, to get alumni involved as much as possible, we're going to have a morning devotional book of 365 stories written by the students, the graduates, and others who have been affected by Loma Linda. Their stories in its mission of the healing and ministry of Jesus Christ. They're making a decision about what the book will be called. Tammy Thomas, who's the current dean and was vice dean at the time, she spoke right up when they said, we're going to consider names for this new devotional book. And she says, I'll be very disappointed if this is not called Morning Rounds, which is a common term used in the practice of medicine and patient care. Well, once that book was named, there's no thoughts we'd ever have a follow-up book, but when that book became very popular, we knew that when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the first graduating class, we'd have another devotional, and that became Evening Rounds. And 5 years later, when the hospital opened up, we have now Grand Rounds. My wife has said, Donna's her name, said no more books. It's a work of commitment and love, and she's glad she did it, but she doesn't have the energy for any more books.
Well, I need to work on her because I want the final round as a culmination instead of a
final round. That's actually very good.
Have a four series book. It's been very special. I think it really brings out in real ways value tells or storytelling about our mission and our vision and our values. And our values are exemplified in that book. You know, our values of compassion and excellence and humility, integrity, judgment, teamwork, and wholeness. And I think that to me is very, very special. So, Roger, I can't thank you enough for being on our podcast this evening. You're just a phenomenal individual.
I've enjoyed it. And I'm delighted you do this. And this just kind of fuels my enthusiasm. Thank you.
A special thanks to the sponsor of Evening Rounds, La Loma, who has provided banking services to the Loma Linda community since 1955. Their support helps us continue bringing you episodes focused on health, story, and mission.